One of the biggest mistakes I see these days is the idea that one-off tech cards can auto-win you matchups. Let me show you what I mean with a real world example. So LAIC 2022 was the Lugia V-Star takeover, with it occupying 53% of the day 2 metagame, as well as 6 of the top 8 slots. Lugia was super reliant on special energy, since that's what Archeops could accelerate with its ability, Primal Turbo. And it wasn't long before the player base worked out that Arc Duraludon would be a good counter to Lugia, since its Skyscraper ability would prevent all damage done to it by Pokemon that have special energy attached. This did leave you vulnerable to Amazing Rare Yveltal though, but that could easily be solved with a big Parasol on your Duraludon. Problem solved, right? Especially since Arc Duraludon did get second place at the next regional championship in Toronto. This deck was running through Lugias like a hot knife through butter, and it seemed like there was nothing the Lugia players could do about it. Once that Duraludon with a big Parasol came out, it was game over for these Lugia players. Or was it? See, what if I told you the Lugia players all along had a one card answer to a big charm Duraludon, and they were all playing it too? Lost Vacuum. Since Lost Vacuum would remove the big Parasol, meaning Amazing Rare Yveltal could now KO the Duraludon, it turns out all the Lugia players had the answer already. But if all the Lugia players had the answer all along, why was Duraludon still such a threat? Well, it goes back to the one card can auto win you the matchup myth. You see, while it's all well and good, playing a vacuum, it's not that good if you simply can't play it. And while you're trying your hardest to draw into it, your opponent will be boss KOing your Archeops, putting you on a 3 or 4 turn timer to find that lost vacuum, making that vacuum all but useless if you can't find it in time. So how do we fix this situation? Well, Lugia players came to the realization pretty quick, and they started to add Irida to their lists. What this effectively did was turn your 1 card answer to Duraludon, Lost Vacuum, into a 10 card answer, since all your ball search could now find Lumineon, and that Lumineon could find the Irida, which could then find the Lost Vacuum, making the matchup much more manageable. So give that a thought when you are building your next deck. Sure, 1 card might flip a matchup, but you still have to find it in time for it to actually put in work. The next myth is that you should try and tech for every matchup possible to counter the whole meta at the same time. Again, let's use a real world example to prove why this is wrong. Here is a Mew VMAX deck. This deck is built to hit super hard, super fast with Mew and Meloetta. Its place in the metagame is based around the fact that it is extremely consistent with a ton of card draw and can swing as early as turn 1. However, Mew is super vulnerable to Drapion V, since it can OHKO you and take up to 4 prize cards while doing so. I don't like the sound of that, so I'm going to add Big Charm, Radiant Gardevoir and V-Guide Energy to put myself outside of range of Dynamic Tail. Perfect! Duraludon can be a bad matchup too because of its Skyscraper ability, so I'm going to put in 2 basic energies and Training Court, so now I can hit through Skyscraper. Perfect. Lugia can be pretty annoying too, so let's add Path to the Peak to stop its Summoning Star. And Lost Box is very frustrating, so let's add Lost City to remove their attackers. And Regis can also be scary, so let's add Heroes Medal 2 so I can only give up 2 prizes to their Gigaton break. And boom, now we have a Mew deck which is capable of beating anything in format, right? Well, you see now this deck is trash because it is so inconsistent in everything it does. While in extremely good scenarios our techs might swing us a game or 2, in so many other games those extra cards really dilute our deck from being as consistent as possible. This means that our turn 1 Meloettas are going to be much more harder. All those turns where we need to find 3 modifiers to KO V-Stars are going to be much harder now, since our hand will get clogged with useless junk we don't really need, making our deck much worse. So as a good rule of thumb, try and play 1 or 2 tech cards at one time maximum. However, this last mistake is probably the one that I see committed the most, normally to my good friends who I see at regionals or international championships too. Last minute changes to your list like the night before a big event or something never tends to do well. Like sure, I've told stories on this channel of decks being built the night before regionals and doing well, I get that. But these normally tend to be world class players piloting them. For us mere mortals, sticking to an archetype ahead of time and only making slight changes to react to the meta is so much better. This allows you to learn a deck, all its matchups, and how to navigate them. This inside knowledge of a deck and all its matchups and plays is absolutely paramount, and trust me, it trumps everything else. So as another rule of thumb, you will always do better with a deck you know inside and out over a deck you don't know but might be slightly positioned better in the meta. Because trust me, you will make so many mistakes with a deck you don't know that you otherwise wouldn't with a deck you do. So please, 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 please stick to your deck ahead of a big event and don't make any drastic changes. But here's a last little bonus mistake that I see a ton of players make, and it is you don't have to build your deck from scratch before every event. Now trust me, I understand that some people's egos will not let them play a net deck. They always want to build a whole new deck from scratch so they can say, I don't copy anyone. Right, so trust me, I understand. It doesn't sit well with some people, you know, going on Limitless and grabbing a deck and just net decking it and playing it at the next event. Some people really value building their own decks from scratch to try and counter the meta, and it's their own creation. Because trust me, something just hits different when you do well with a deck that you made from scratch. Trust me, I 100% understand this. However, most of the time it's really hard to build a new deck that no one else has thought of that also does well, because if it was really that good of a deck, someone else would have thought of it already. So do yourself a favor sometimes, get yourself on Limitless, see what's doing well, and just run with it. Don't get me wrong, you can make some slight changes to some pre-existing archetypes, but it's a lot easier to do well with a pre-existing deck than it is to try and break the meta every time. Trust me, I've been there. Although in saying that, I have actually done a video where I set myself a challenge where I had to build a whole new deck for under £10 that hasn't already been built already. So feel free to check that out if you want to just completely ignore what I just said. And if you're going to need a deck for those IRL events, why don't you check out Pokédex, link in the description. They can send you a whole deck exact to your liking as early as the next working day. And why don't you use Dragon Shield sleeves to protect those decks as well.